Good morning. We are here on Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 to have our regular general hearing. We've got a relatively short agenda today, but first order of business is a roll call of commissioners. So Ms. Amaro, if you could do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Ackerman?
Here.
Commissioner Cross?
Present.
Commissioner McGowan?
Here.
Commissioner Messner?
Here.
Commissioner O? Commissioner Ray? Commissioner Robbins? Mr. Chair, you have 4 out of 7 commissioners present today.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda are commissioner comments. I will start by saying that last week we had the opportunity to travel to the Western Slope. And as part of that travel, we had a public meeting in Glenwood Springs. Always good to have an opportunity to get to the Western Slope and different areas of the state and hear from folks in those areas. I think it was a good public listening session. I think a lot of different perspectives were shared. We did have an opportunity to present some information on how we implemented SB 19-181 and kind of the things that are going on with the COGCC, and then took about an hour and a half worth of public comment at that meeting. And so always appreciate the input from different folks from around the state. In addition to that, we had an opportunity to meet with COGCC staff and rifle, which is always a great opportunity to see COGCC staff in different parts of the state in person, as we don't often get an opportunity to do that. And so really appreciated the opportunity to do that and to hear the happenings that were going on in the northwest part of the state. And so with that, do other commissioners have comments? Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also just like to reiterate the appreciation for the public coming out and giving public comments in Glenwood Springs, as well as staff for taking the time to meet with us while we were on the Western Slope. Also, last week, we were able to go to the Energy and Environment Symposium in Newcastle, and I think it was a good opportunity to hear from members of sister agencies, federal agencies, local government, both county commissioners as well as oil and gas designees, members of industry, educators. And it was good to just get some different perspectives on not just what's happening with oil and gas, but with alternative energies, what's going on with some of what the local governments are trying to do with regulations, et cetera. And so I thought that was a good opportunity to also meet with the public and hear what else is going on.
Agreed. Other commissioner comments? Seeing none, I will point out that we do offer public comment at every Wednesday public hearing. Today there was no one that signed up for public comment, nor did we receive any written comment. And so that's why you don't see it on the agenda. Next up on the agenda, however, is the consent agenda. Do any commissioners have questions about the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. With that, next up on the agenda is docket number 221-200-368, which is a OGDP application from Desert Eagle Operating. Ms. Amaro, do we have everyone from the applicant's party with us today?
We do. I'm promoting the rest of the panelists. They'll be up in a moment.
Okay. And who on the panel would like to start?
Good morning, Acting Chair Messner. Jill Fulcher here. I will kick us off. If you give us just a moment here, we will start our share screen, and then we are just going to make sure we've got all of our panelists up and ready.
That sounds good.
All right, great.
You can start whenever you have everyone available to you.
Sounds great. Looks like we've Got the screen up and going. Everybody can see that on their end, correct?
We can, yes.
All right, excellent. Well, good morning again, commissioners, and good morning to you, Chair Messner, to commissioners and to staff, the director and members of the public. My name is Jill Fulcher, and I'm an attorney with Beatty and Wozniak here today on behalf of Desert Eagle Operating in this docket, which is 221-200-368. This is an application to amend an existing OGDP, which is the Red Rocks Oil and Gas Development Plan, to add 4 new oil and gas locations and vertical wells for helium extraction in the Lions and Precambrian crystalline basement. So I'm going to provide you all with a brief overview of the application, just tee it up, and then I'm going to kick it to our subject matter expert, one of our panelists, Gwen Brodsky, who will walk through our slide deck. And then from there, we will be available for questions. And we've got a host of panelists here to answer any questions you may have today. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Ryan. So as I mentioned, there is an existing oil and gas development plan in place for these lands, and that is the Red Rocks OGDP. That was unanimously approved by the Commission on November 17th of 2021. The existing Red Rocks OGDP consists of 880 acres of unspaced rural fee lands owned by a single surface owner in Los Animas County, Colorado. There are 2 single oil and gas locations that are approved on the existing OGDP, and then 2 wells that are authorized on each of those respective locations that have been drilled and are producing helium from the Lions Formation. As this commission has heard several times before, helium, of course, is an inert gas, and it looks very different to develop helium than it does oil and gas in other parts of the state. For example, and you'll hear about this, the wells are drilled with air. There is no drilling mud, proppant, or hydraulic fracturing required to drill these wells. These are shallow wells, and the rig that's used, and you'll hear this from Ms. Brodsky, is very similar to the rig that would be used for drilling a water well. In fact, it's the same rig. The current application before you is asking to amend the order that you approved back in 2021 to allow 4 additional vertical well locations for helium extraction. This application was filed by Desert Eagle on December 19th, 2022, following pre-application consultations with Commission staff. We do appreciate all of staff's time and effort in processing and reviewing this application. And we did want to take a moment and just call out special thanks to Secretary Larson and Ms. Trask for all of the additional work that they did on this application, and especially the pre-application meetings that they had with Desert Eagle. It's very appreciated. As I mentioned, the application before you requests approval of 4 additional locations. Those are identified here on the slide as the Red Rocks 114, 116, 3508, and 3511 locations. And each of those contemplates only a single vertical well on the locations. No other amendments are being requested with respect to the size of the lands. We are asking that the Precambrian crystalline basement formation also be added as a possible target. But again, the lands remain the same, which are portions of sections 1, Township 30 South, Range 55 West, and portions of section 35, Township 29 South, Range 55 West. This application has been noticed to all interested parties, and we do have a director's recommendation for approval of this application. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Ms. Brodsky, who will walk through the remainder of our slides. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Gwen Brodsky with AYADA Technical. I'm an environmental consultant and help Desert Eagle prepare the applications. And Ron, we'll go to the next slide. This illustrates in yellow the application lands. I'll go through a few slides here just to describe the project. On this figure, we can see with location IDs the 2 previously approved and drilled locations, and the locations that are part of this amendment are shown with these red squares to represent all 4 proposed locations. This is 880 acres of 100% fee interest mineral leasehold. The wells will develop fee minerals, and the application lands are unspaced with respect to the Lions Formation and Precambrian crystalline basement. Each location is fee surface under an SUA with a single surface owner, and the locations will develop a single well. Each location will develop a single well pursuant to Rule 401B. The locations will be about 1.1 acres during well development, and they'll be downsized to about 0.2 acres after interim reclamation. We'll go to the next slide and describe that the siting is really optimized distance from receptors. This is rural ranch land. The nearest residence is well over a mile away. It's approximately 3 miles. The locations are over a mile from the nearest school or high occupancy building unit or designated outdoor activity area or disproportionately impacted community. It's over a mile from high priority habitat. There is no immediately down gradient surface water, and the locations do not meet any requirements for analysis of an alternative location. On the next slide, this is an illustration of the typical drill rig that will be used for well drilling. The single well on each location will be a conventional vertical helium gas well. It'll be about 1,800 feet deep. They'll be drilled with a rig as illustrated here and drilled with air. There is no hydraulic fracturing or stimulation, and there's no anticipated water or hydrocarbons based on the results of other wells in this area, including the 2 that are now producing. And therefore, there'll be no tank storage. These will be tankless locations. And Ryan, yep, the next slide shows a bit about the schedule. The site preparation will take about a day. Drilling will be approximately 7 days, 3 days for completion, approximately a day for interim reclamation, and then the wells are expected to produce for 10 years. During operation, the locations that are downsized to about 0.2 acres will have only a wellhead and an 8-inch buried helium gas flow line. That helium gas will be piped underground to offsite helium processing equipment that's operated by Desert Eagle. And at that equipment, helium gas is concentrated, it's compressed, and loaded into tube trailers for transport by truck. On the next slide, we describe a little bit about the outreach. Desert Eagle engaged the surface owner on this proposed amendment and received support from the surface owner for the development plan, each of the locations, and the timing of development. In particular, the surface owner requests that well development be concluded by about fourth quarter, before the fourth quarter and outside of elk hunting season. Notices were provided to mineral owners. There was no public comment received and no petitions were filed. The relevant local government is Los Animas County. The county received the 30-day notice prior to application and the director's completeness determination. Los Animas County's own permitting consists of an application fee, location bonding, and a 14-day administrative review of the Form 2A information submitted to COGCC. So Desert Eagle submitted those applications to Los Animas County on March 22nd for all 4 locations, and on April 18th received Los Animas County approval for each of the locations without any conditions and with no comments. And on this last slide that I'll present, we wanted to say a few things about best management practices for the locations. Regarding air resources, the wells will be drilled with air over a relatively short 7-day period. No mud, no hydraulic fracturing, no proppant, no stimulation needed for these wells. They will connect to the helium gas gathering system during production, which is zoned by Desert Eagle. Regarding traffic, there's going to be an estimated 24 round trips to prepare the site, drill the wells, and conduct the interim reclamation. And then during production, there'll be about 8 round trips per month with a light duty truck to monitor and maintain those locations. For spill prevention, the drill rig motor will have a liner underneath. That drill rig has a double-walled fuel tank, and the locations will be tankless during production. The use of fresh water will be minimized to about 4,200 gallons per well, which will be used for dust suppression. The soil disturbance will be minimized to about 1.1 acre per pad. Desert Eagle will preserve that topsoil to facilitate interim reclamation, and stormwater will be controlled using down gradient stormwater wattles. The locations are greater than a mile from high priority habitat. Using formerly disturbed ranch land, drilling will occur during daylight hours, and the locations will be production. In public welfare, Desert Eagle is avoiding public impacts from noise and light and odor from siting the locations greater than a mile from the nearest residential building unit. The director did grant a lesser impact exemption for noise and light mitigation plans. And also regarding public welfare, dust during drilling will be minimized using a water mist system, and that water will be sourced from the landowner's stock well. With that, I do want to turn it back to Jill to conclude with a slide or two about the request.
Thanks so much, Gwen. Yeah, as Gwen mentioned, we'll just summarize the request before you again today. The application requests following today's hearing an order approving the amendment to the 880 acre Red Rocks OGDP for these 4 new locations for development of production from helium gas wells to the Lions and Precambrian crystalline basement formations. We ask that those proposed wells be approved for location on the locations you see before you and in the docket. And then that we have approval of the Form 2As for the Red Rocks 114, 116, 3508, and 3511 locations. And finally, that the Commission's order find that the amended OGDP will avoid and minimize impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife. So that concludes the walkthrough of our application. As I mentioned, we've got a host of panelists here ready for your questions, and want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, are there questions? Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation today. I'm wondering if there's going to be future development in this same kind of geographic area, and whether or not we should in the future kind of be looking more comprehensively at, as it builds out, so to speak. Or if this is, I know helium is kind of limited to specific spaces and places, but I was kind of curious to know what the future was going to look like, and if there is a way to share with the Commission if there is a more comprehensive landscape view of what's going to be happening with helium development.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McGowan, for that question. Andrew Payton has made himself visible. I think he's probably going to be the best to answer that right off the bat, and he serves as a geologist for Desert Eagle.
Yeah, hi, Karen. So to answer your question, I can really only speak to the leasehold that's in this OGDP application. And as it stands, right now we just have the Red Rocks 113 and 3515 producing. And so until we can drill these next 4 wells and kind of test and evaluate the Lions and also the Precambrian basement target, it's just kind of too hard to say if there might be additional wells. So I guess we just need to collect more data at this stage, and then we'll use that to determine what we do down the road.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. We've had some conversations with other operators in the past of like, how long do you consider this, searching and exploring versus you are now kind of operating. We'd like to know your longer term plans and how it's going to play out. So I would, if you guys get to a point where you think that there's going to be more activity, I think that the Commission would appreciate a landscape view of what your future plans are. That would be helpful. My second question, I think I saw in the director's recommendation that you all were still working on your financial assurance. And I just want to make sure we have that all squared away.
Thank you very much for that question, Commissioner McGowan. And I will start answering, and then if anyone from Desert Eagle wants to do any follow-up or if there are follow-up questions, we'll go from there. Yes, Desert Eagle has submitted its Form 3 timely under the Rule 702. For Desert Eagle, they were required to submit the Form 3 by December 31st of 2022. based on being an operator of 10 or fewer wells in the state. That Form 3 was submitted, I believe, December 19th of 2022. So about a little over a week before the deadline. It's still pending with the commission. At this time, we know that engineering staff is still undergoing its review of that Form 3 is our understanding. We've had multiple outreach points with the commission staff on this, and we haven't heard of any concerns with what has been submitted. I think our understanding is this is just kind of a result of where everyone is sitting with the influx of Form 3s, which I know are significant. The Form 3 that was submitted contemplates an option 4 plan. So as you all know, that is not an option plan that requires a commission hearing. It is a plan that's approvable by the director following director's review administratively. And we are not asking for any exceptions to that plan with respect to the amount of financial assurance that must be remitted each year. I think it's 10% of the total. In fact, in this particular instance, because these wells are so shallow and so unique with respect to plugging and reclamation, we're talking about an extremely small surface footprint of about 0.2 acres following interim reclamation. We have submitted the option for single well financial assurance demonstrating actual plugging and reclamation costs, which is authorized under the definition of single well financial assurance. Because as you know, the definition is twofold. You can present actual costs, or you can go to the amount specified under rule. Right now under rule, that amount would be about $110,000 per location. And we have evidence to demonstrate that the actual plugging costs here would be around $15,000 per location and per well. Again, we're talking about very shallow wells and a very small surface footprint. And a lot of that evidence is based on the operator's experience in plugging and reclamation in other areas, and then as well as third-party data that we've gathered and put forward to the engineering staff. As I mentioned, we've not heard any concerns from engineering staff to date. And that's where we sit, is just waiting for the Form 3 approval.
That's super helpful, thanks. And Commissioner Messer says I have a little bit of feedback, so sorry, I don't know why that is.
Thank you, Commissioner McGowan. Are there other commissioners with questions? I don't see any other questions, so at this stage, we'll thank the applicant and enter into commissioner deliberations. Commissioners, does anyone have deliberative thoughts, or is anyone interested in providing a motion?
Move for approval of the application.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second for approval of the application. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Ackerman.
Not much, Commissioner Messner. Thank you, or Chair Messner. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation today and appreciate the work that's gone into it. I especially appreciate the extensive inclusion of BMPs in the application. I think an amendment to this application is appropriate, so I appreciate that approach from the operator. I had some of the same questions that Commissioner McGowan brought up, and would second her thoughts on thinking about the global plan, and maybe there's a cap, maybe there's the larger OGDP at some stage. That's, I think, all I had. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. Any other thoughts? With that, we have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is there any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks so much, commissioners.
Commissioners, that concludes our agenda, unless anyone has anything additional that they would like to bring up. And if not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That concludes our meeting today. Thank you.